Hello, all kind and adequate people. In today's video, I will tell you how to regulate your cholesterol synthesis. Probably many of you know, who are interested in the topic of atherosclerosis, that, according to various data, about 20 to 30% of cholesterol comes from food, and about 70 to 80% is synthesized in the body for its own needs. That's why many people immediately have the following opinion. We don't need to think about what we eat. Anyway, cholesterol is mainly formed inside the body. But we can, nevertheless, influence the rate of formation of this cholesterol. And this is a critical point. So today, I'm going to talk about a simple way. What you should eat to regulate the production of bad cholesterol in your own body. For general education, you may already know that our cholesterol is not transported in the blood by itself, because it simply could not dissolve in the blood. It is transported by small particle balls called lipoproteins. Inside these balls are cholesterol esters, fatty acids, cholesterol, and on the outside is a protein shell. Because the protein shell has polarity and makes good contact with water, the fats hide inside. Lipoproteins are divided into high-density lipoproteins, low-density, very low-density, and then there are things called triglycerides. All of these things float around in our body and are transported to the cells of various organs so that the cholesterol from these small particles goes to our own needs. There's no question that cholesterol is needed. I think it goes to synthesize cell membranes, you probably already know that, to synthesize hormones, and to synthesize bile acids. Thus, you can't live without cholesterol. When there is too much cholesterol, it is also very bad. There are people who have familial hypercholesterolemia. They have too much cholesterol. They have very early deaths from heart attacks, strokes. Of course, cholesterol is called good cholesterol and bad cholesterol depending on what lipoproteins it's in. If we take high-density lipoproteins, it is good cholesterol because it is in these lipoproteins transported from the cells to the liver for metabolism. Low-density lipoproteins, on the other hand, are called bad because, actually, they make up the majority of our lipoproteins. They transport the cholesterol in their composition from the places where it's synthesized. And it's synthesized in two places mainly, in large quantities, the liver and the intestines. But also, cholesterol is synthesized in general in any of our cells for its own needs. Sometimes cells need cholesterol, for example, to build some of their membranes or to produce hormones. And then, low-density lipoproteins deliver cholesterol to the cells as a building material. To get cholesterol into the cell, low-density lipoproteins must attach to special sites on the cell surface. These sites are called receptors for low-density lipoprotein. In popular science literature, they may be called LDL receptors. When low-density lipoprotein connects to these receptors, the receptors pick up a constituent of lipoproteins called apolipoprotein B100. You can simplistically call it apolipoprotein B. By the way, there is a lab test for apolipoprotein B, and it just reflects the meanest cholesterol. That is, by and large, you should look at the level of apolipoprotein B. It can already tell a lot about whether a person has prerequisites for the development of atherosclerosis. Although, of course, there are enough and other options, and lipoprotein A, small, which I told you about recently, and many other factors, insulin, thyroid hormones, glycated hemoglobin, and so on. So many things. But back to our low-density lipoprotein, which has bound to a receptor. Together with all this receptor, it is transported inside the cell, where two processes take place. The receptor itself detaches from the low-density lipoprotein and then returns again to the surface of the cell to trap other lipoproteins. And the low-density lipoprotein, once in the cell, is broken down to cholesterol. Then, depending on the type of cell, it goes either to synthesize certain hormones or cell structures. If it is the liver, to synthesize bile acids. But what is most interesting? Attention, it is very important. Cholesterol, once in the cell, binds to a special protein that regulates the activity of the enzyme that produces cholesterol synthesis. That is, the cholesterol itself, entering the cell, causes a decrease in the production of cholesterol by the cell itself. This mechanism is called the negative feedback mechanism. The cell realizes that it has enough cholesterol and stops synthesizing it. Everything is great. Cholesterol is trapped by low-density lipoproteins. Low-density lipoproteins are trapped on the surface by receptors. The receptors then transport this cholesterol, and cholesterol synthesis is inhibited. But it is easy to guess that everything would be very good if the number of these receptors in people was large. And indeed, there are such people. They have naturally low cholesterol. Those who have a large number of receptors to low-density lipoproteins, they are actually resistant to all sorts of dietary errors. That is, they can eat fried potatoes, sauté, eat cake, drink juices, fruit sweets, and they will always have low cholesterol of low-density lipoproteins. Why? And because in such people naturally, as a result of mutation of an enzyme called proprotein convertase subtilisin kexin type 9, this enzyme does not work. Accordingly, it destroys the receptors for low-density lipoprotein. If the enzyme does not work, receptors to lipoproteins are not destroyed. There are many of them on the cell. Accordingly, they trap themselves bad cholesterol in the bloodstream, and it gets into the cell perfectly. As I said, this reduces the production of your own cholesterol. On the contrary, there are other people who try not to eat anything like that, and they still have bad cholesterol very high. Why is that? These people, on the contrary, have a low concentration of low-density lipoprotein receptors. The same thing, they have a mutation, too high activity of an enzyme called proprotein convertase subtilisin kexin type 9, PCSK9 for short, and these people have severe forms of familial hypercholesterolemia. I have told so in detail in order to remember. A large number of receptors, bad cholesterol catchers, on the cell surface is good. It reduces the level of bad cholesterol. And a low number of these receptors is bad. Now for the most important part. How can we increase the number of receptors for bad cholesterol? It turns out by eating vegetable fats. It turns out that vegetable fats contain high amounts of unsaturated fatty acids. Unsaturated, this means that they have double bonds in their composition, which are highly active, can attach other chemicals to themselves. Accordingly, saturated fats are those that have already completely filled all their bonds and can no longer attach anything else. So unsaturated fats, vegetable fats, sunflower, corn, olive, linseed, and so on, oils, all of them, we will not go into the concentration of omega-6, omega-9, and so on. And the pro-inflammatory potential of omega-6 can be questioned. I have already made a video about arachidonic acid, which is also omega-6. But these polyunsaturated and simply unsaturated fats have the ability to increase the number of receptors for low-density lipoprotein. So by eating vegetable fats, you increase the number of receptors that will capture your bad cholesterol, which will then be processed in the cell and inhibit the production of your own cholesterol. So you're killing two birds with one stone. Well, if you eat animal fats or vegetable fats, but with a high content of saturated fats, and this is, let's remember, palm oil and, strangely enough, coconut oil. People eat little coconut oil, but nevertheless, it is saturated fat. I am not talking about butter, dairy fat products, lard, and so on. Saturated fats are known for the fact that they form lipoproteins of very low density. And these very low-density lipoproteins take longer to circulate in the blood and can cause more damage to blood vessels. Of course, you can't give up saturated fats altogether. It's recommended that they should be about 20 to 30% of all fats. But for those people who do have problems with high levels of bad cholesterol, either low-density lipoprotein or high apolipoprotein B, they certainly need to limit their intake of animal fats. But they don't need to limit, maybe even the opposite, increase vegetable fats. And also, by the way, omega-3 fats, they contribute to the reduction of triglycerides. But that's just for the record. They do not affect the receptors for low-density lipoproteins. That's all I wanted to say. Consume more vegetable fats, polyunsaturated fats. Eat nuts that grow on trees. Walnuts, almonds, hazelnuts, and you will have less cholesterol, less cardiovascular disease. That's it. Thank you very much.